I think it's also important through this process was realizing that and this is probably part of growing up, not one person, like there is no one person who can be your person. Like not even like your partner can be your person, but like you gotta split up some of the duties and some of the nuances of things, and like, you know, have a community and different people that you can lean on. But not only that, there's a process of learning to be your own voice of wisdom, which is sort of what I've been learning too.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between. Today, I have Gail Gallagher on with us. She will be sharing her journey of grief and also a little about how she has incorporated that into her musical background that she has. So she'll be sharing a little bit more about it. So welcome, Gail, to this episode today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And if you hear us kind of being a little bit like, okay, let's do this again. This is like take 4 today because we've had internet problems. So we're trying again, and hopefully you guys can listen to it, flow properly, and the sound will come out well. We're having some internet connection issues. So let's hope that this works. This 4th time's a charm. So Gail, share a little bit about your musical journey in your studies, and then we'll share a little bit more about your personal life.
All right. So as Kendra said, I'm Gail Gallagher. I am a Chicago-based musician, and I have been working in the Chicago improv scene for nearly a decade. And I do a bunch of different things. I improvise on piano for improv groups. So we have groups that do full-length improvised musicals on the spot, team of actors making up a musical, and then I accompany them. And I've also written for musical theater and sketch and all sorts of stuff in that world. I'm also a teacher, and a lot of my philosophy of what I do is really tuning into this like improvisational sensibility and going with the flow of whatever it is you're working on, and just sort of saying yes to whatever shows up, and exploring in that realm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I was hearing about improv musical theater, because we connected in this matter that I'm in theater as well. Well, I studied theater myself, but I had never heard of improv musical theater. And I was so intrigued when you shared that. So I learned something new myself. So thank you.
Yeah, it's this whole world that like in a scene that really is unique to Chicago. So being a part of it as it has grown has been really cool. And that has also impacted how I operate as a songwriter. As I've started to write original music, having that improv sensibility has really made it easy to just sort of hone what it is you're trying to say in the moment, and do a bunch of different takes on a different themes of songs, and then sort of picking out the stuff that stands out. Yeah, so it's been very
That's
cool.
awesome. That's great. Now, where did your interest for music come from in theater that you studied that? Who was the artist in your family? that maybe you,
Um,
if there was an artist in the family that kind of, was that a gene that was passed down? Was it an interest that you had?
so it's interesting. There are definitely a lot of visual artists, especially through my mom's side of the family. My great uncle, so my grandma's uncle, my great uncle was
Mhm.
actually a painter in Chicago, as was my great grandfather. And my great uncle painted train posters uh, in like gosh, it was like the 20s or whatever, but you know, those like Art
Mhm.
Deco, like
You-
See America
Yeah, in
posters.
the
He did
sub, like
those.
in the sub, I was gonna say like subways, but you mean in the in the actual, like just were these like, oh, actual train posters, the ones that you would just have like those black kind of frames on, like
Yeah,
actual
those like see the world, you know, explore Yellowstone. It's the 20s and
Oh
railroads are
yeah,
fun. That
okay,
kind of
got it, got
stuff.
it, got it. Yes, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
his name was Leslie Reagan. And my great grandpa also was a painter for movies, for movie posters back when movie posters were hand painted. Um, and then looking back at that side of the family, my grandma's a quilter, my mom was a quilter, is and yeah, and had an artistic sensibility, but was also
Mhm.
very analytical. And then meanwhile, on my dad's side of the family, we're all patrons of the arts.
Mhm.
My grandparents were huge supporters of the arts in my hometown, and I grew up going to the symphony and yeah, just being involved with theater and all these things. So we didn't have anybody specifically who was, quote, living the dream to look up to, but there's definitely a creative spark in the family.
And you know, the aspect of that visual, like in your songs, because I've heard two of them, they're very visual. Your songs are visual. So it's like an art piece, but in a music, you know what I mean? Like you can see the visualization of what that would look like even in a picture. You know what I mean? So it's like you've kind of transposed that visual art to auditory art. I think that was like running in your family in a different way, because music is that everything is just so uh artistic, you know, artistic anyway, right? All of these things regardless of how it is expressed, so you do have that artistic gene for sure.
Yeah,
That's
well, thank
awesome, thank
you.
you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Now tell me a little bit about, then we're going to be talking about your mom, so if you want to share about your family dynamics just a little bit, and then we'll go into your mom's passing and so forth. So I know it's kind of like going from something so witty and fun and talk about music, and then all of a sudden going into this, but that is the topic of of
Oh,
the
for
uh
sure.
of the podcast. So
That's why
if
we're
you don't
here
mind
today.
sharing a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So, goodness.
Okay, yeah, you
What's
able
where do
let's
you
reel
want
it
me to
in.
start?
Yeah, I know, I know. Okay, so I know a little bit about it because about your family, because we already spoke prior to this interview. So you are one of two children,
Yes,
and
correct.
you have a brother. Let's see how much I remember of our interview. And so you did not grow you grew up in Iowa, but then moved to Chicago after having gone to school. But tell us then, when you were in Chicago, then how often would you see your mom? If you want to tell a little bit
Oh
about
yeah,
your relationship with your mom,
absolutely.
and then we'll go from there. How about that?
Absolutely.
Is that
That's
better? Is
good.
that a little
Yeah.
bit more honed in?
Yeah, it's cracking open
So
that book
broad.
is a lot to start with. No worries. So, yes. So I'm from Iowa originally. And yes, I'm one of two kids. My parents divorced when I was in like 4th grade, but they were very amicable towards each other. They like ended up moving into houses like around the corner from each other. And uh and so but we always did like separate like vacation trips, and the trip that we would always take with my mom would be to go out to Chicago every summer, see some shows, go to the art institute, make sure to eat at the Berghoff, very important things. And she sort of showed me, she made sure that we knew our way around the city and that we could figure out how trains work, and we weren't afraid to do things that did it catch my husband sneezing in the background?
No, no, it
Okay,
didn't
great.
actually. So that was a good thing, right? It cut off right in that part
Yeah,
when
I just
when
had
we
this
needed to
moment
cut off.
of uh anyway, continuing on. Um
Well, now we know she's married, people. Now we
yeah,
know
now we
that
know
part of
she's yeah,
information.
yeah, now the spoilers. Uh uh anyways,
So then you're talking about the city that your mom wanted you
yes.
guys to be able to navigate the city.
Absolutely. And so I knew even in high school like that I wanted to move to Chicago after college. And in my little teenage brain, the logic was go to college in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is larger than Waterloo, Iowa, and it was like a stepping stone to then moving to Chicago. So anyway, moved to Chicago, and then my parents would come out to visit me a couple times a year. My mom would always come out like right around Christmas or Thanksgiving. And then when I first moved to the city and wasn't able to rent cars, she would usually come out like the week before, and then we drive me back home, or we continued the ritual though of going to the art institute, going to the Berghoff. She'd come see my shows, and it was this cool full circle thing of like I live here
Mm,
now. um
mm.
yeah. And
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's a
and
good
it was
memory to have. Yeah, good little, and I'm sure you'll pass down that tradition if if you have ever have kids in your life and so forth. You probably will pass down that tradition as well, since it was something so meaningful of that bond that you had with your mom.
yeah. Yeah, and
That's really pretty.
and it was funny, she also like made sure to have a pass to the art institute even though she didn't live in Chicago. She just liked having the membership and like having that option.
So
And
cute.
for yeah, and so it was very cool.
So even if it costs less to buy it like one time,
Mhm.
for that one time, it's still better to have the pass, like the yearly pass. Like, was it that feeling of, is that kind of what she was doing? Like those memberships that you maybe would be worth it if you were to go more than one time a year, but she just liked having it.
Yeah, I think she just liked having it, and we did get to a point where I would just use her pass, throughout the year, and then, she could use it when she came out, and then they started like cracking down on it, and I was like, no.
I love it. Okay, so then your mom then tell me, where were you living? Were you living in Chicago then when she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma? Were you already living in Chicago?
So she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma my senior year of high school.
Oh, in
Um,
high school. Okay.
yeah. So she was diagnosed. So that was 2005, 2006. And
Okay.
that was, and when I was a senior in high school, she was going through the stem cell transplant and all of the stuff therein. And she was down in Iowa City at the hospital there, and they had, and they're very particular about like immunity things. So visiting her was a whole to do. And what I remember about that time was being solidly in like that senior year mindset, and people asking me if I was okay, and me just being like, well, I'm convinced that she's invincible and this is just a thing we're doing. Like, I don't think it ever processed that, like, that her dying
Mm-hmm.
was a possibility. And also, like,
Mm.
senior year survival mode, you know? Um,
Yeah, your focus was you had a different focus in that moment. You were just kind of going through the moves of just like, okay, I'm graduating. Where am I going to go to college? Where am I? That the idea of
yeah,
seeing your mom's diagnosis as a reality of something that could go a different way
yeah,
outcome, was not really in your scope at that moment
yeah.
in time.
And so then
Mm.
she was in remission for most of my, growing into adulthood. And we, just sort of moved on. She retired right when I moved to Chicago. and life just sort of went. She had like assorted you know health things here and there with her body going on, but nothing like you know nothing necessarily with the multiple myeloma. And then in 2013, she started on chemo again, and it started coming back, and so she was managing treatments with all of that. And then the summer of 2016, they determined that she needed to go in for another stem cell transplant. And so that during that time, so I was in Chicago. I was working part time at a music school and freelancing it up. And like I had all of the gigs, and I was like super booked, living my best life. And I definitely remember like just being almost in denial about it, and being like so busy that didn't want to I was overbooked. I knew I should have probably dropped everything and gone home a few times, and I did make some time to do that, but like I was just like solidly in my zone because mom wanted me to keep focused on what I was doing. So
Busy.
anyway,
And the
um
busy, and to keep busy probably too. She probably wanted you to still keep doing what you were doing, and not worry about her, right? Like she was basically she was still being a mom even through
yeah.
her illness, of making sure you were doing what you needed to do to kind of maybe even keep you distracted from what was going on back home.
Yeah, exactly. And she would say like she would basically say like so much of your job is about being focused and in the moment, and I don't want to take away from that. So,
Mm,
which is
okay.
true with improv. I was kind I sort of I felt complex feelings about that because my ability to stay focused and in the moment is a core part of my survival strategy. So I was convinced that I could have handled both realities, you know.
Mm,
but but
mm.
who knows? It is what it is. Uh, anyway, um, so where
At
are
what
we at
point
in
did you
this
go?
story?
Yeah. So at what point did you go then? So this we're in that summer of 2016. So at what point did you go then, um, to spend, some time with her?
Okay, so the first time I went out when she was going through those treatments um, was Mother's Day. It was right after Mother's Day, and I called my mom, and then I called my grandma, and my grandma was like, "She's not actually communicating how serious this is, and you should
Mm,
go out and like just go out and make sure you visit, in case things do get bad." And when your then 89-year-old grandma is like, "Hey, this is bad,"
mhm,
you
mhm,
get your happy self out to Iowa. So I went out and visited her for a few days. Sam came out as well, and that's my now husband, then boyfriend, and we spent some time with her. Things were still pretty sound. We made our way back, and then uh, due to a series of misadventures that I will not go deep into, after the stem cell treatment, there were a myriad of complications. Because the thing with multiple myeloma is the core part of the treatment kind of goes at your immune system. So all sorts of things can go wrong. And so um, that like it was like late July. um, I got a call from my aunt that my mom was in the ICU, and I promptly canceled all of the things that I had scheduled that weekend, rented a car, and drove out to Iowa. Um, and she ended up, um, we ended up having some time to like hang out and have her like she got off the vent, was conscious, We were hanging out. She was a little loopy on drugs, so that was fun. But we had a
Yeah, you said in our pre-interview that you had a good week being together and in the hospital, even though she was recovering, like that
yeah.
you had good memories of that
Oh
visit.
yeah. And she was like seeing she said she was seeing cat shadows, like the drugs had she was like hallucinating that cats were coming around the corner, which is like
It's a little creepy.
it's a little creepy, but it also like she was a cat person, so I was like, okay. And we like she really wanted crepes from the local village inn, and so Sam and I went out to get her uh crepes and sausages and sneak them in, even though that was technically not what she was supposed to be having, but she was
Probably
done with the
Jello.
hospital food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did stuff like that, and my aunt and I were doing a little bit of recon on making sure we had like the power of attorney and all of that stuff lined up. And at one point mom was like, now I have no intention of dying, but I will be making a spreadsheet that will be on my computer. But like I said,
Mm.
I have no intention of dying, but I'm going to work on the spreadsheet tonight. So
So
it
she
was
was,
just
yeah, she was
very frank.
prepared. So she made that you called it the Doomsday Book. That's what
Well,
you called
she
it?
had the Doomsday Book, and then she just had I forgot what she named the doc, but it was a very clearly labeled Excel spreadsheet on her desktop that had like, this is what I want for the funeral, this is what I want for like the important things that need to be divvied up, and a couple other notes about this, that, and the other thing. Um,
I want to
yeah,
ask you because even though that's like hard to know that your mom is making something like that, like a document to prepare, again, even though she was saying, even though I'm not going to die, but just know that I'm going to prepare it. You know, when she did pass away, like, did you find that comforting to have exactly what she wanted? Like the fact that she had prepared this document, she had this doomsday book, like she called, of her wishes. Did that bring you some sense of comfort?
I mean, yeah, it definitely it was this interesting thing where like she had communicated about some of that in our like late
Mhm.
night talks, even when I would come home and visit. She made sure that I knew that there was a jump drive of all of her passwords in a lockbox at the bank, and also on that jump drive was a fill in the blank obit. So I just had to
What? A obit? What's an
yeah, she
obit?
wrote an obituary.
Oh,
She
obituary. Thank
had
you.
the
I'm like, what's an
obituary
obit?
all prepared. Yeah, and you just had to fill in the blank.
Interesting. Like the date, like
Yeah,
basically, like
yeah,
just fill in. So she was really prepared. Do you know how long she had written that? Do you think that even after her first diagnosis, like 10, what was it, 13 years before?
yeah.
What
I
was her?
actually
So.
I there was a time when, because I have her computer, and
Hmm.
the which someday maybe I'll go through and clear and deal with all those files, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But I on her computer I did there was some late night digging that happened after she passed, and I found this doc where she had sort of written out her thoughts in case she had passed that first time. So
Mm. So she did think of her mortality then.
yeah,
It's just interesting because, and we were talking about this, you and I, when we're talking, like it's something that we all know that we're gonna die, right? That we all know that is not something, but we just don't know the when. Yet again, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the wishes sometimes with others in regular conversations. Sometimes those things only come up when we've been hit with a diagnosis or things like that, right? That then maybe, because even sometimes some people don't even want to talk about it even then because they feel that it may bring the person's emotions down if they're trying to focus on their healing, and to talk about death or things like that can affect their process of healing, I know that for us as a family, that's something we kind of were back and forth with when my mom was diagnosed. But I think that it's just also so comforting, at least when you were sharing this, that to know that she had done this. It took a little bit of the thinking from you guys' part, to try to kind of figure out what it is she wanted. You had that there. And it's kind of like a gift to some extent, because then you can end up focusing more on your emotions rather than all the little bits of pieces that you have to kind of figure out along the way. Make sense what I'm
Yeah, no,
trying to? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's that is your mom was really wise in doing that. I will take some notes and learn from her with that for sure.
Hmm.
With then her process, then how were you dealing with emotionally? Because it was from her second, this I mean, this was a long process, right? So 2000, what was it again? 2000, her first diagnosis 2003, then
So first
2013.
diagnosis was 2006, and then
Oh, 2006.
and
Okay,
then
so
it came
2006.
back in
Then
2013.
2013, and then 2016 is when you were there, went for
Hmm.
Mother's Day and all this. So how were you, aside from kind of keeping busy with your work and school, how were you processing the the idea of your mom uh, maybe going to die just before the actual happening? How were you processing that as a young, in your teens and then in your early 20s?
Um, so I feel like looking back at the person I was, um, going from like my teenage years, um, to when mom passed, I think I all lived with the idea of it as an underlying anxiety that I don't think I ever really sat with in a meaningful way. I think if I actually looked at sort of my way of being and my like drive for things, I'm gonna use an analogy. How well do you know the musical Hamilton?
I saw it. I haven't seen it on
Okay,
stage, but I
there's a
saw
there's
the.
a okay. So you know the
Mhm.
basic
Yes,
archetypes and things. So
yes.
there in one of the documentaries, about Hamilton, they talk about looking at it through the lens of grief. And if you look
Mhm.
at Hamilton's whole way of being, of like writing like you're running out of time, uh,
Mhm.
that is 100% me. Um,
Mm.
and so I think my response to uh, that being an eventuality was very much based in trying to, well, I was also growing my career at that point, so I think it was like a combination of I am out in the world trying to prove that I can make a living in the arts and also wanting to make my mom proud.
Mm.
And um so there was a very big chaotic energy trying to do all the things, way of being that I held, and it was also in conjunction with my teens and early 20s still, so who's to say. But I think that particular anxiety and that particular like stress was a weight for a very long time. And I think actually processing, and before my mom passed, my grandma Gallagher passed and my grandpa Gallagher passed, within
On
like
your
a year
dad's
of
side.
each
Yeah, that's
other,
your
of
dad's
my dad's side.
your dad's side. Mhm.
Yeah. And so that was sort of the beginnings of getting comfortable with how grief works and how, um like having a sense of like reverence and legacy and somewhat spooky moments where you feel a sense of somebody like that. Like I had those moments with them passing that I also was able to like talk to my mom a little bit about. And so then when it came to my mom passing, it was a different thing to process. And part of that is, um, she was a little bit more skeptical spiritually. than I am, or that my grandparents were. My grandparents were like super devout Catholics, so like it's really easy to be like, "Yep, they're with the angels now. No big deal," you know. You can pray to grandma as your as Jesus's personal secretary, like if you're into it. Like it's a lot more logical. Whereas with my mom, she, I mean, I don't know where she ended up finally standing with her spirituality, but we're UU, so Unitarian Universalist, which means that everyone has their own free search for truth and meaning, and it's okay if you only believe in God on Tuesdays, like we're that church. um, and she was a lot more skeptical, and so we had a UU chaplain come pray with us when we found out that we were moving mom into palliative care. And there was this moment of, okay, it's one thing to theoretically believe in the God of many names, but it's another thing to reach out to all of the names of all of the gods to for the real, very real process of seeing your mom's spirit into wherever it is that we go. Um, as I was making sense of it all, I had these um after she passed, I had all of these moments of like little signs and things. And it was funny because anytime I had these moments of like noticing little signs and stuff, so depending on the context, my mom would make a sarcastic comment about it or be like, "Yeah, but okay, whatever." Um, and the wildest sign story I have is that so it was like a few days after she had passed. I was back in Chicago, but before the funeral, and I'm walking by the beach, and on this bench there's this ratty piece of quilt, and I'm on the phone with a friend while I'm on this beach walk, and I say to my friend, she didn't believe in this stuff, and now she's sending me quilts."
So for you, you were right away, you saw that as a sign. Did your friend, like when you told her like that represented for you, that represented her, what did your friend think
uh,
of you
she
in that
thought it was
moment?
very cool, and like literally
That's
before
awesome.
this moment happened, I was talking to her about like having this intense feeling of my mom's presence, and then I saw that piece of quilt on the bench.
That's awesome. And then share the one that you read, the paper you saw while you were in the car.
Yes, absolutely.
That
so
that
um
anecdote.
so I had inherited my mom's car, and I was cleaning it out. It was like a few months after she had passed. And here's the thing, we had all these conversations about the nature of spirituality and of God, and there's so many conversations that I wish we could have had. And I opened up the part where like you keep like the spare wheel and like all the other junk that's like underneath the like trunk place. And I opened it up, and there was this piece of paper that looked like it was taken off one of those like conference room like giant notepads, and written in the center of it, it said God equals creativity.
Oh.
And I
And
was like,
then her right.
okay. And it was
She
very
did believe. You're like, she did believe in God. She does. You're like, she did.
I mean, well, and also on that sheet of paper were all these other it looked like it was taken from a lecture at some like
Mm-mm.
church class, and like because there were other theories on the sheet and other
Mhm.
philosophers on the sheet, but the one that was face up was the one that said God equals creativity.
Which is just so perfect, being again that you are this artist. Your mom liked, art, and that expression and that love for art for her was also a connection to, the bigger, source, to source, to God, to whatever we want to call it, without her probably necessarily calling it that.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and yeah, no, and it's so many things where I'm just like, No, I think she had a sense of it, but she didn't she refused to call it that, which is
Mm-hmm.
valid. I have a similar sensibility. Um and and another thing, we did have conversations about what she believed in and what resonated with her. And I remember her saying that what gives her meaning and what she is drawn towards is patterns and order and solving problems and putting things together in different pieces. And that came out in her quilting as well
Mm.
as in her work as a database analyst for John Deere. And it, it was a core part of like why she liked tech so much. Like she enjoyed being in tech support roles because with computers there's usually only like there is one clear answer that you can find, but people you
Mm.
can't. So she was like, I
Mm-hmm.
like computers because there's
Mm.
usually one answer. And maybe
Yeah, it's
it's
kind of
turning it
like
off and
math,
on again.
like math.
Yeah.
Yeah, like math too. Like, okay, if I do this, I get this. Like, I know that there's a way of problem solving, and yeah. So her an analytical and pattern mind was the way that she associated with the world, and so for you to find that little thing that kind of showed God equals creativity, was that like, did that sound like something she was drawn to, you think, as well, because she did have that creative mind with the arts and stuff with the quilting? Do you feel that that was actually what stood out to her even in that lecture?
Yeah, I think this was something. Yeah, I that would make sense that
Yeah.
that is what resonated with her.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that um there's a certain agency in that belief because the creativity does, I mean, it's coming from inside the house, but it might have an
Mm-hmm.
influence from a higher power, like, but it also is this state of being that you can have ownership of. And I think
Mm.
that's probably part of why that gelled. She also, this is the other weird story I had for you within these different stories about her beliefs. At one point, during a time when I assumed she was whacked out on chemo, she DM'd me completely out of context on Facebook, had messaged me, and she just said, I have an idea for a lay led sermon, because churches that we can totally preach if we want. I have an idea for a lay led sermon. If they're heeding the secular call, if there is no God, then who's on the phone? I haven't gotten around to writing it yet. Um,
Did you ever tell your friend, the one that was the chap, the one that's your friend at the church? Did you tell her about, did you show her that DM?
I think I showed it to her at one point. But I
Because that
might.
would be a good, now if she, since your mom had the idea, either for her or for her to come up with the with the sermon being in that theme, starting, at least she's got the title for it. that your
Um,
mom creatively wrote while on chemo meds.
I honestly, I that has influenced a lot of my journey and a lot of my art. And there's definitely a doc on my computer, entitled "Who's on the Phone," because I tried to write it as like something because I could, but it is a very curious thing, and that sense of having a sense of something calling, but you don't necessarily know what to name it, has
Yes.
been a core part of my journey and like appears a lot in my writing as well. And so that's a theme I've been exploring a lot.
I
So
love.
yeah.
So yeah, so her little messages just resonate with you, and they've influenced also just the way that you create. Now, how have you then continued then this grief journey now? So she passed away in August 2016,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yes, correct.
And tell tell a little bit about the drive, you and Sam driving, um what you get in the, I think it was during that time, I believe you shared the story with me about while you guys were in the car driving there and listening to
Yeah, listening to
blasting
Hamilton. Yeah,
Hamilton. Yeah.
yeah. So, and we're gonna go down
It's
the whole train of Sam stories. So, Sam, my now
okay.
husband.
Yes. That's a perfect. There we go.
Yeah,
That's an awesome way. We
we're
an awesome segue.
here. We
Yeah,
go.
because it's
Oh,
yes. Here, Sam. Sam's in
so
the
the Sam
picture
through
now.
line. So Sam, my now
Yes,
husband,
I love it.
was so he had come out to Iowa a couple days after I went out, when like mom was dying. More medical misadventures that ended up moving us to a different a hospital in a different
Hospital.
city. It was
Mhm.
a whole thing. But anyway, so mom had passed, and we were driving back to Iowa. And in my now new car, because I inherited my mom's car, so it was like, this is your
My
car
now new
now,
old car.
the new old car.
My now new
Yeah,
old
no,
car.
it was, which is, sidebar, a surreal moment. And she had actually
Mm,
kept me on her insurance that whole time, like that I didn't have a car, so I could just drive the car. So
perfect.
she she thought of everything. But anyway,
Wow.
so we're driving back to Chicago. We uh, are just like, we've been feeling all the feelings for days with my family, who are also feeling all the feelings. And we were listening to Hamilton, and it was during That Would Be Enough, which is the song with the "Look at where you are, look at where you started, you're lucky to be alive right now," like that whole thing. I totally misquoted that, but that's the consensus. And
Mhm.
I look over at Sam, and he's crying, and then I start crying. And then I had this moment where I said, um, well, I think after experiencing this, we are stuck together. Like, and I meant that in like a this is it sort of way, not in a like a, well, guess we're stuck together, but in a deep, meaningful, like, hey, let's get married sort of way. But also to have the common sense that this is a engaged to be engaged moment, because we're gonna need to process all of the things that just happened. But it was definitely the moment where we were like, okay, this is a thing. This is definitely a thing. Um, and after we had that conversation, The World Turned Upside Down played. So it was just like, and we just like cackled. Um, so then fast forward, we're at the wake.
Your life is a musical. Your
Um,
life is
I
a
spoilers. Wait till you hear about the album. But anyway, yeah, I definitely I like when life has a soundtrack. I love those moments.
yes.
So that's how I make sense of the world. But anyway, so then fast forward to the wake. My aunt comes up to me, and she brings me this ring, and she says, "This was your great grandmother's ring. You should hold. Your mom would want you to have this." And she like looks me dead in the eye and looks like Sam dead in the eye, like just no subtlety whatsoever. And I just go, "Oh, well, that'll work." And my uncle high fives me. I definitely didn't say, "Oh, well, that'll work." There was definitely a swear in there. But I said that, and then my uncle high fived me. And then the ring lived in my jewelry box, and I actually had it I had a jewelry box that was my mom's, that I basically sorted all of like the heirlooms into. And so I kept the ring in the heirloom box, and then figured when it was time for it to get mysteriously sized and hidden from me, Sam would know where it was. Um, and mom really did get a chance to know Sam, and they got along really well. And in that super doc that she had written in the hospital, in the notes about how things should get distributed, she had written at the very bottom, "Let Sam go through the kitchen things." And Sam's a professional cook, so that's part of the significance. But that was
Mm,
one of those moments
so
where
neat.
it was like the seal of approval.
Mm.
Um,
Yes, yes, she loved him and left him in the will, like in her doc or will doc, what
Yeah.
document slash will. She had included him in that and what she wanted all her things of the kitchen to do. She knew he would appreciate them, and that's awesome. And that did he take a lot of the things? Did he
He,
take a lot of the things from the kitchen?
yeah, it was all sort of a blur, but we definitely got some stuff, and
So,
and then we got married, so like then we got a bunch more stuff. So,
yes. Now,
but
on your
yeah,
wedding day, how was that day? Because this happened how long after your mom's passing that you guys got married?
so we got married 2 years after my mom passed. So let's see, yeah, because it was September 2018. So we just passed our 2 year anniversary, so that's great. Um, yeah, there was I have this cycle going with the theme of that underlying anxiety that about the reality of mom passing. I have gotten wise and observed that a lot of times there are times when you get really stressed or hyper focused about a particular thing, and then underneath it is grief. The planning process of the wedding was particularly stressful, as trying to plan an event with all of your family and everyone is. um and but on the actual so in the planning process, there were definitely moments where it was like, oops, there's no mother of the bride.
Mm.
Guess I get to make all my own choices, because there's so much, like, there part of the wedding industrial complex, which is a whole other podcast, but part of the wedding industrial podcast complex, wow,
Complex.
complex, there we go, um is like how much the mother of the bride is in there. So that kind of got beaten over my head a little bit, including there were some moments
The
where people
wedding
were,
dress
yeah, yeah,
shopping.
like, um but one thing I was able to do is sort of split the varying roles between friends and family. So like my friend Lindsay went with me to get to pick out my wedding dress after we watched hours of Say Yes to the Dress for research purposes. Um
Really, really, really? Was
research
it just research?
I there was wine and research. It's important research, because then I knew
Okay.
that I what kind of dress I
What
wanted. It was
dress you
great.
wanted?
Yeah, I got a
Absolutely,
princess
absolutely.
dress. I didn't know I wanted a princess dress, but I
Until you
figured it
saw
out.
yes to the dress. We
I
should credit
know.
them in this podcast.
I guess.
Maybe I should see if they want to like sponsor this podcast. And I'm like, this podcast is sponsored by Yes to the Dress. Say yes to the dress. Okay, so then
Anyway,
you designated. I liked when you said that. You designated different friends. You'd be like, okay, you're gonna be my this person and this. So that was one of the things you did. But go ahead and share the part that Lindsay went with you with the dress shopping, and then afterwards, I want to hear the other designated
hmm
roles that you did with your
yeah.
friends and family.
So my friend Lindsay did the dress shopping with me, and that was awesome. And and she was the person who helped me find the dress. And honestly, like, taking one person is great. The thing we learned from our very important research is that when you have a whole committee voting on what you're going to wear, it's a mess. So it was good to just have someone who was very clear and direct, which is probably what my mom would have been like, had she not made the thing herself. Uh, but it
It
was
would have been a
very.
quilt dress, Gail. It would have been a quilt dress.
It would have been more. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway,
I'm joking.
so got the dress. That was cool. And then when we got flowers, my friend Laura was like the consultant on flowers. And so flower shop lady, uh
Oh, it was at the flower shop. I
it
thought
was
it was
at
at
the
the dress
flower
shop.
shop.
Oh, at the flower shop. Yeah,
Yeah, so we
this
wandered
part
into
is
the
important
flower
too.
shop,
Yeah.
and the woman running the flower shop said, "Oh, the mother of the bride isn't here," or like just made an offhand comment like, "Oh, no mother of the bride," like, and just kind of a, I don't think she meant anything by it, but I was just like, "My friend Laura will be here," and then later. uh well, first of all, she seemed also kind of Sam was there as well, and she seemed kind of perplexed that Sam had more interest in flowers than I did. So that also blew her mind. So yay, role changing. But then there was a moment where we asked for a memorial flower, and so it was
Mm.
like
Then
awkward.
she knew.
Yeah, then
But
she
it's,
knew.
but it's good to know like these little things of the awkward things that are heard in those moments, because it's also a learning opportunity for us. Because even if we've had an experience of somebody dying, I'm sure we've all put our foot in our mouth in several occasions of things that we should have not
Oh
said,
yeah.
right? And this is this experience that had at the flower shop was one of those that, yeah, she if she would or hear this, she probably were to then, or she did realize it, you said, because she had them, you guys ordered the memorial flower,
Yeah.
so she probably is like, oh my gosh, I'll never say that comment again, if anybody comes in here without their mom to shop for a dress. And so then, so tell us the other designated things, the other people, what roles did you designate? Because your mom was your friend, your mentor, your everything, right? She was the person you would go to for advice, right? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So looking outside of the designations within the wedding, a lot of
Yes.
what I did after my mom passed and sort of the world I've been building for myself has been realizing that I have to split the role that my mom had amongst other people. So there are like people you can hire for things like my mom did my tax accounting, and I finally just got an accountant who's great. And I started working with a therapist and also like just occasional career coaches and stuff like that, and sort of splitting, and then I also um, had my best friend Geneva is the friend that I reach out to as the mom call. Um
Mhm. And
and
she knows she has that card.
oh
She
yeah,
knows
she knows, yes.
she knows she's the mom call. Yeah, she knows she has that role in your life.
Yeah, no, like I at one point I was on the phone with her and I was like, "Do you just want to be my mom call? Like you are the
Mhm.
person that I call." And I mean, and I'll call my grandma too, and there's like this bonus feature of, still having her around and like having that like that connection as well. But like
Mhm.
Geneva like and I have a more similar like conversational base.
Mhm.
And I think it's also important through this process was realizing that um a uh and this is probably part of growing up, not one person, like there is no one person who can be your person. Like not
Mm.
even like your partner can be your person, but like you gotta split up some of the duties and some of the
Mm.
nuances of things, and like have a community and different people that you can lean on. But not only that, there's a process of learning to be your own voice of wisdom, which is sort of what I've been learning too. So not only was I designating, finding people to sort of hold all those different roles that mom had. But as I was going through the grieving process and going through all this stuff with spirituality, there was a moment where I started to, over time, I'm starting to like recognize my inner voice of wisdom, all that good stuff. And it took a while for me to go, that inner, I kept wanting to interpret that inner voice of wisdom as my mom. And after a while, I was like, no, that's you. You're wise. This is definitely stuff that comes from your mom, but that's you. And part of what I think I've learned is to also trust myself and guide myself more and be like, okay, well, I'm the adult in the room now. And yeah, and not necessarily leaning on like there isn't one person who's going to tell me everything that I need to do.
Mhm.
I am able to discern it for myself, and I can definitely look to people as mentors and guidance. Like I have this committee, as it were, of
Yes.
friends and mentors, but like I'm in the director's seat, and that's been a huge part of the journey.
That's awesome. And then Sam is your, what role does Sam play in your designated roles?
I mean, he's main family. He's the main,
He's your rock.
the main rock. So
Hmm. Yeah, it's like you're, he's home. He's home.
he's home.
Um,
That was
yeah.
definitely a thing
Uh-huh.
that happened. That actually touched on a thought, because for a very long time too, mom was home, and
Mm-hmm.
then that role shifted over to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you would associate, oh, let's go back home, or when you'd go visit your mom, like go visit, let's go visit home. But now home is you guys, you're
Yeah.
him. That is just a beautiful, and I think that is a really wise tool, or advice, I think, for anybody who's had somebody pass away, the aspect of making sure to talk to those around you and letting them know that they are going to kind of fill in this little portion of what you need. Because I think that if they know, like your friend Geneva, knowing that she's the mom call, then she knows when you, and you might say, hey, by the way, I'm using you as the mom call, kind of thing. So she knows when she's maybe kind of doing more that advice, of motherly advice type of thing, and not the friend advice. Right. More of that kind of voice, per se, that you may need to hear at that moment. So I think that's really good advice. Now, what other tools did you use, or have you used and keep on using in your journey? You mentioned you have gone or go to therapy. How about in your art? How has that come up?
Um, this whole process really started me into songwriting, and not just songwriting for other people, but songwriting for myself. And I think that has been a huge part of the healing journey. So I and this is a wild thought, but in the midst of everything that was going on in those first few days after I lost my mom, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, shoot, I can be a writer now because there's a lot of feelings happening. Because before that, I was like, oh, well, I got the job I want, and have a nice partner. What am I going to write about? Women running around the
Mm.
woods? Like, everything's fine.
Mhm.
So, like, part of me was like the slightly the artisty artist
Sarcastic,
part of me was
and
like
sarcastic side of
the
you.
sarcastic side that's also trying to see the light of things, because that's how we do in
Hmm.
my family, was
Yes,
like
with
uh
humor. Hmm.
yeah, and that's also a through line with my mom and something I inherited. But anyway, so I was like, hey, I'm gonna write some stuff. But I started doing different songwriting challenges, and wrote a lot of songs that were just for me, and that's okay. And then over time, I started um, finding, like, going out to open mics and singing songs, and figuring out who I am as an artist. And yeah, and kept growing and changing and healing, and then writing songs while I was doing that. And it's interesting how the process of not only writing those songs but continuing to sing those songs and perform them and share those experiences with other people has been its own journey.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, and has helped me sort of process and sit with things. Now, it doesn't mean that the feelings are like, it doesn't mean I solved it, but it does mean I have encapsulated the grief in these different pieces of art, and that's
Beautiful,
cool.
beautiful. No, that is just so awesome, because it's like you used the gifts you already had as the way to be able to have these cathartic experiences for your own grieving process. It's the the writing, the composing, and being able to share that way, not only to others, but also again, as you're singing them, it's a cathartic experience, right, for yourself, because you're kind of living those emotions and evaluating the emotions you have, and also maybe sitting with them and seeing like, do I still even feel this way? Have I grown in my grief?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't necessarily stay the same in our grief all the time. Like the emotions are always there, but they kind of grow. Do you notice that sometimes? Like if there's certain times in which you sing it that maybe you're like, oh wow, like there's parts of this that still like hit me to the core, and there's parts of this song that now I'm okay with. Like I can, oh okay, I kind of grown in that aspect of my grief. Do you notice that?
Yeah, I definitely think I noticed that. I think well, especially my song Giverny, which is the one that you listened to or were mentioning earlier.
Yes.
That thing is a sometimes song, and it took me a while to realize it was a sometimes song because it was also my
Mm.
first single, which was a choice that I probably wouldn't have made, but because it is a
It had to.
deeply
The
personal
timing was
grief song. Yeah.
right.
And
You had to, because it was part of your grief journey, regardless
yeah.
of whether it was the one that needed to be out for the public. It's the one that needed to be out
Oh
for
yeah,
you.
and I think the act of putting it out there was important. I just didn't know how to market it because I was like,
Hmm.
"It's my first single," and people were like, "Why is it sad?" And I'm like,
Mm.
and that was a whole thing. But if I had said, "Hey, this is a tribute to my mom," very clearly and openly, great. But I don't think I was comfortable with saying that at that point, which is a whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. When you write deeply personal art, is how do you share about it in a way that is a scar and not an open wound, And
Ooh, ooh.
yeah.
That's a really good analogy, what you're just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's an open wound, you are still, it's going to hurt if something is said or expressed about that piece that really hits you to the core if the scar is still open.
Yeah. And I
If the
think,
scar is, sorry, it's the wound. Sorry, if it's a wound and not a scar. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that song sort of treads the line depending on the day. It's a powerful song. And I've had friends tell me like that is a sometimes song. Like they'll be like, I was working and this song came on and I did not want to listen to it because I did not want to go there. And I'm like, you know what? I respect that. you know? How cool is it to write art like that? But also, it took me a while to recognize that song's power. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a
No,
cool
it's
thing.
very visual. It's a very, that's the one I heard that I was like, message you back. I'm like, are you in musical? Do you have a musical theater background? Because I'd only heard the song. Like, I didn't know your background until I heard it. I'm like, I can see that. I mean, I see the storyline of the play, of the musical with that song, like a complete storyline. I mean, I see it. And I'm sure you're sorry, or you could write a play just around that song, for sure. So I really do see it, and and we'll share that in the show notes as well, so that people can know what it is we're talking about. Is there something else you wanted to share, Gail, with that, with your either grieving process and the tools that you have used? Your music, of course, has been this huge vehicle for not only healing yourself, but also helping others as they're hearing these things. It can help them assess their own life, and grief music is just so powerful. Um, is there something else you wanted to share that I did not ask or we did not touch upon?
So, I think one more thing in regards to grief that I think is incredibly important is that it is a constant process. There's, a million metaphors that float around with how to describe it, but a it is a mysterious thing, and I am the sort of person that like tries to get an A in being human, and I'm like trying to like be the like feel like I've accomplished this and I've solved this problem and and like I don't necessarily want to there's still a little bit of that like emotions are not necessarily weakness, but like there's still a little bit of negativity that I harbor towards that. And over time, and I think part of being an artist, you realize like, no, things are just gonna come in waves. Like it grief just
Mhm.
comes in waves, and you just like there's a I think Tara Brach uses it, but there's this metaphor of like, sometimes grief is gonna come over for tea, and you're gonna hang out and you're gonna drink your tea, and by tea I mean listen to a sad song and cry a little bit, and just like do what you gotta do, and it's okay. When I was first processing things, I was talking to my minister friend Eva, and she was like, "There's a reason why people like wore black armbands back in the day. It was to like note that like this person might be a little bit on edge because they're grieving."
Mm. See, yeah, that's so
And I'm like,
true.
man, and I think it's also so important in this world that we're in right now is we're all like living in different stages of grief, and that's also
Yeah.
been part of like as I have been learning about my own grief and like observing the world around me, it's just this fascinating thing where it's like, oh man, we all have a bunch of stuff we need to process, and we should all like have like the option to have like black armbands or something that are like, hey,
Mm.
like don't mess with me. Like, man, we should
Mm.
bring that back or something, like some sort of signal that's like I might be a little bit on edge. Like,
Yeah, just went
goodness.
through something really hard. Yeah, and yeah, and that empathy would probably be more out there if people just knew. And that's the thing, we should probably just treat everybody like we were saying. Everybody's going through some level of grief. It might have been that somebody lost, their mom, but it could have been a change of jobs. It could have been losing their home, losing, it could be all kinds of different aspects of grief. As you said, right now, everybody is experiencing some form of grief with what we're experiencing in the world right now with the pandemic, that and with other things that have
Yeah,
come to light in this time, that that yeah, we just have to have more empathy towards each other and always kind of be on, on that. And that when you go to the store, and if the lady or the clerk, gentleman or whatever at a store does not treat you maybe as friendly or as much with a smile as you would have wished, just maybe think maybe they're just not having, they're maybe going through a hard day. They might have just found out the worst news in their life today, like having that awareness. That is very nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, do you want to just kind of say how people can find you? I'll make sure, of course, to add the websites in the link. But if you want to just kind of share that out loud as well
absolutely.
before we close off.
Absolutely. So, my website is gailgallaghermusic.com. My album, Power of the Unnamed Passion, is coming out October 23rd. And you can check out my website, will have all the information on that. I'm also on Instagram, Sparkle Bard Gail, and my Facebook artist page is Gail Gallagher Music. Yeah, and that is what I have going on. I'm creating music. I'm teaching lessons online. I'm, just sharing my story, sharing my art, living the dream.
All right. Yeah, we'll be on the lookout for the next kind of Hamilton style musical of Giverny. I cannot pronounce that.
Giverny.
Giverny, Giverny,
Well, and
Giverny
my
of
album,
Giverny. I
yeah,
I really do.
and my album Power of the Unnamed Passion is sort of the Giverny's like a prequel to the album. The album
Okay.
is 12 tracks sort of exploring like the experience of healing, and
Oh,
yeah, and I want to do it as a solo show when the world opens up and we can do shows again. So
yay! I'll have to go to Chicago to go see you on stage
that'd be
when the
amazing.
when the world opens. Well, thank you once again. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and even though we got to know each other through this journey of grief, it's been an honor to meet you, the artist, and you, Gail, the daughter of your mom's name.
Oh yeah,
What was your
Janet
mom's name?
Janet Heiners Gallagher.
Janet and Janet's daughter. So thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.